Thursday, August 3rd, 1978. At an isolated farmhouse outside of Appomattox, Virginia, 54-year-old Alfred Harwood Coleman, known to his family and friends as Doc, is at home in bed. At approximately 9:30 p.m., something drew Doc from his bedroom to the back door of his house. Moments later, the calm of a warm summer evening was shattered by the report of a shotgun blast. The single blast killed Doc Coleman and set in motion a series of events which 42 years later remain unresolved. Today, the Appomattox County Sheriff's Department, along with Doc's surviving family, are still hoping to identify his killer.
Doc Coleman's murder was brutally cold-blooded in nature and bore all the hallmarks of a premeditated act. Doc was known locally as a kind and gentle man who was generous with his money, and the brutal nature of his killing shocked and appalled the residents of the small Virginia community, a community where violent crime is exceedingly rare and unsolved crime even more so. Recent developments concerning Doc's killing have once again prompted law enforcement to re-examine this decades-old tragedy. This feature was filmed and produced at not only the request, but with the complete and enthusiastic cooperation of Doc Coleman's family and the Appomattox County Sheriff's Department.
Appomattox, Virginia, population 1,800, is located in the Piedmont region of the Commonwealth. It is perhaps best remembered as the rural town where the American Civil War was concluded with the surrender of the Army of Northern Virginia at the Appomattox Courthouse on April 8, 1865. Today, Appomattox is the near epitome of small-town America. With its period Main Street, rolling countryside, and comparatively low crime rate, Appomattox seems to fit the idyllic notion of a safe and secure locale where one generation after another can grow up and thrive in relative peace and quiet. Alfred Harwood Coleman was born in Appomattox County on December 5, 1923. He would spend the next 54 years of his life there, rarely, if ever, venturing further away than Lynchburg. Doc was very close to his family and lived with his mother in this wood home on the family property about 5 miles north of Appomattox. When his mother's health began to fail, she moved out, and Doc remained behind, the sole occupant of the family home. Doc was known locally as a very kind and caring man. Although somewhat shy and soft-spoken, Doc was not a recluse. He loved the outdoors and was especially close to his many bird dogs and enjoyed feeding them planters' nuts from the back porch of his home. Like many other Americans, Doc was also a fervent baseball fan, an avid follower of the New York Yankees. For many years, Doc worked the night shift at the old foundry in Lynchburg, Virginia. When Doc's employment there was terminated in 1977, he took a job as a general clerk at the Oakville Farmers Supply Store, about 2 miles from his home. Patrons at the store also remember Doc as a friendly and generous person who was not stingy when it came to extending them store credit or helping them carry their packages to their cars. Several acquaintances later recalled that Doc was also not selfish with his own money. One individual later recalled that Doc once paid them the face value of a $2,000 check out of his own wallet. Sadly, many feel that it was Doc's open and kindly nature that may have ultimately led to his murder. It was no secret around the county that Doc was known to carry sizable sums of money on his person. Several of his family and friends had cautioned Doc about this potentially dangerous habit and expressed concern to one another about it. But Doc apparently had no desire to change his ways. He seemed happy and content with his life and its somewhat predictable nature. Doc's daily activities rarely deviated from a general regiment. Part of his job was to open the Oakville Farmers Supply Store each morning, Monday through Saturday at 6 a.m. Later, those who knew Doc could only recall 2 occasions when he was diverted from this near-clockwork routine, once when his car had broken down and once when he had overslept. Each time, his absence was immediately noticed and someone went to check on him. Nothing seemed to be amiss or out of the ordinary, right up to the day when Doc's life was brought to an abrupt and violent end. By all accounts, Thursday, August 3rd, 1978, was no different than any other day. Doc opened the store just after 6 a.m. and remained there until its closing at 5:30. Nothing in the contemporary accounts indicates anything suspicious having occurred during the course of his workday. It is known that at some point during the morning, Doc cashed another personal check for a young male whose identity is unknown. The check was for $89, and Doc again paid out of his own pocket. His employers later stated that this was quite common for Doc, and it was not considered out of the ordinary. At approximately 6:10 p.m., one of Doc's neighbors observed his car turning into the driveway which led back to his home. A short time later, at approximately 7 p.m., Doc was visited at his home by his brother, Kenneth, usually referred to as Red. Red reportedly remained at Doc's home until about 9 p.m. Red later recalled that Doc was eating his dinner when he arrived and that everything appeared normal. Red remained at Doc's residence for just under 2 hours, during which time the brothers talked and sorted some tomatoes into 2 metal buckets on the back porch. Red's wife later reported that he arrived home at just after 9 p.m. Sometime between 9:30 and 9:45, another of Doc's neighbors reported hearing what was described as a gunshot coming from the general direction of Doc's home. As the area was rural in nature, gunshots were not an uncommon occurrence, and the neighbor thought little of the noise at the time. No other disturbances were reported that night. At approximately 6:30 a.m. the following morning, an acquaintance of Doc's, Riley Megginson, noticed that the Oakville store had not yet been opened and that Doc was nowhere to be seen. Alarmed at this, Megginson walked a short distance down the road to what was then known as Drinkard's store. He reported to 2 others, Carl Martin and Malcolm Drinkard, both cousins of Doc's, that something was not right. All 3 of the men knew Doc and his usual routine, and they would often congregate at the store once Doc had opened up. Doc's absence was concerning to all 3 men. Carl Martin, a 30-year employee of the State Highway Department, tried to reach Doc by phone but got no answer. The men waited for another 10 minutes, hoping that Doc would show. When he didn't, Drinkard and Megginson decided to drive the short distance to Doc's home to check on him. Carl Martin remained behind at the store. A few minutes later, Drinkard and Megginson drove up the driveway to Doc's home, where they were met with a horrific sight. Lying on his left side in the rear doorway, half on the porch and half in the kitchen, was the lifeless body of Doc Coleman. Not wanting to disturb the scene by entering the house, Drinkard remained at Doc's residence while Megginson returned to the store and informed Carl Martin of their grisly find. As this original call sheet indicates, Carl Martin contacted the Appomattox County Sheriff's Department at 7:08 a.m. to report Doc's death. Deputies and medical personnel were immediately dispatched to the scene. After picking up Carl Martin from Drinkard's store, he and Phelps drove out to Doc's home, where Megginson and Drinkard were waiting for them. The crime scene was secured, and Doc's brother Red arrived shortly thereafter. Deputy Phelps approached Doc's body and checked for a pulse. None was found, and it was also noted that the body was already cold and stiff, indicating that death had occurred at least several hours prior. The cause of death was brutally obvious. Doc had been shot in the face and shoulder by a shotgun. The effect of the blast was devastating. Doc Coleman's face was badly mangled, and a large amount of blood was found on the cement porch. Along with Red Coleman, the deputies entered the home and made their way to Doc's bedroom. The bedsheets were in disarray, and 3 pair of trousers were found lying across the bedside. Another pair of trousers, olive green in color, were found in a corner of the bedroom. They still had a belt looped through the waist, and a pair of keys and change were found in the pockets, in addition to a wallet. No other wallet was found in the pockets of the other trousers, and it appeared that they had been ransacked and then thrown down. Nothing else in the residence appeared to have been disturbed, and the front door was found shut and locked. Theorizing that the killer may have made off with a large sum of currency, merchants in the Oakville and Appomattox region were warned to be on the lookout for any individuals flashing an unusually large amount of cash. Once the initial sweep of the scene was made, the CSI began in earnest. Evidence technician D.T. Robertson and investigator R.A. Pillow with the Lynchburg Police Department arrived and, along with Deputy Phelps, began a thorough documentation of the scene. Doc Coleman's body was photographed where it lay. Robertson and Phelps began sketching out a detailed diagram of the crime scene. In addition to the items found in Doc's bedroom, other physical evidence found at the scene included 3 pieces of gun wadding, one found just over a foot from Doc's head on the porch, another 12.5 feet away in the yard, and another at the base of the wall just behind the kitchen door. Several pieces of broken and shattered glass were collected from the porch, the kitchen floor, and the kitchen door. The kitchen door itself was later entirely removed, along with a section of sheetrock containing 6 fragments of buckshot. All told, 13 separate pieces of evidence were collected and sent to Lynchburg for analysis. Doc Coleman's body was carefully bagged and transported to the offices of the Chief Medical Examiner, David Oxley, in Roanoke. In his report, Dr. Oxley noted multiple grazing and penetrating wounds to Doc's face, neck, and shoulder. At least 3 rounds of buckshot penetrated to the brain, indicating that death would have been almost instantaneous. Although the facial injuries were extensive, Dr. Oxley also noted that no other injuries, defensive or otherwise, were found. Based upon the stomach contents, it was estimated that death had occurred within 6 hours of Doc's last meal. Back in Appomattox County, the investigation quickly widened. One of Doc's neighbors reported that sometime between 9:30 and 9:45 p.m. they were standing near an open window of their home when they heard what they thought was a gunshot. No one else reported hearing anything unusual that night. Several neighborhood residents reported having seen 3 teenagers or young adults walking along Route 608, today known as Stonewall Road, near the entrance to Doc's driveway sometime during the 9 or 10 o'clock hour. Eventually, the 3 youths were also identified as neighborhood residents, and it was ascertained that their presence in the area at that time was not unusual. The youths themselves were later interviewed and reported nothing out of the ordinary during the evening of August 3rd. Failing to find any eyewitnesses, investigators next began to work backwards in time, attempting to ascertain if anything out of the ordinary had occurred in the area during the previous days and weeks. Doc's mail carrier reported that on July 6th and 13th, Doc's copy of the weekly paper, the Times-Virginian, had been stolen from his mailbox along Stonewall Road. It is not known if these thefts had anything to do with Doc's murder. Another of Doc's neighbors reported that in the weeks leading up to the murder, a number of suspicious vehicles had been observed driving into and out of Doc's driveway. However, the veracity of this account has been called into some question, as no other residents in the immediate area reported seeing any vehicles in Doc's driveway, and Doc's brother Red added that the only persons he knew to use the driveway were Doc's family members and residents who were renting or leasing land on the Coleman's property. Doc Coleman's residence was located here, roughly 3/4 of a mile north of Route 608 and approximately 2 miles west of the Oakville Farmers Supply Store. The area surrounding the residence is comprised almost entirely of rolling farmland, which has changed very little over the past 50 years. One notable difference, however, is that in 1978, an A-framed home stood just to the west of Doc's driveway, about 100 yards above Route 608. At the time, the residence was being rented to 2 brothers. These men were later questioned by law enforcement and were found to have not been in the area when Doc's murder occurred. The Oakville Farmers Supply Store, where Doc was employed, was located here, where Route 608 is intersected by Route 26. At the time of the murder, the store sat opposite a modest wood-frame schoolhouse known simply as Oakville School. What was Drinkard's store, today the Route 26 Market, is located less than 1/8 of a mile south of this intersection on the eastern side of Route 26. The town of Appomattox lies 5 miles to the south. In 1978, as well as today, Doc's residence was not directly visible from any of the surrounding dwellings, and anyone approaching Doc's home by vehicle must traverse a long gravel driveway, which is visible for much of its length from several neighboring homes, as well as Route 608. Today, Doc Coleman's home is once again a private residence, and the Appomattox County Sheriff's Department have requested that we ask all viewers to please respect the property and privacy of the current occupants. On August 5, 1978, one day after Doc's murder had been discovered, authorities continued to widen their search. Knowing that Doc had been killed by a shotgun and that one of his wallets was missing, authorities searched virtually every pull-off, dump site, parking space, trash can, and dumpster along Route 608. 2 deputies even went so far as to search the outside toilets and basement of the nearby Baptist church. This search eventually extended outward to include Route 666 and 611 as well, but to no avail. A diver from the Lynchburg Police Department thoroughly searched an area around a bridge over Wreck Island Creek, roughly 1 mile to the west of Doc's home. Again, the search failed to turn up any new evidence. Neither the murder weapon nor Doc's wallet have ever been located. Continued questioning of residents in the area also brought about more of the same. Nearly everyone had the same view. Doc was a kind and generous man who seemed to have no enemies, and no one had any idea who would want to kill him. The only incidents of any consequence which authorities were able to confirm involved very minor disputes concerning fence damage caused by cattle from adjacent property and a possible disagreement over a right-of-way. However, each incident had occurred at least 1 year previous, and both seemed to have been quickly resolved or forgotten. While deputies and detectives beat the bushes, the investigation was pressing forward on the forensics front as well. While DNA technology had yet to emerge from its embryonic stages, the science of hair and fiber analysis was just coming into its own. This, coupled with the well-established fields of fingerprinting and ballistics, gave investigators at least some cause for hope. A fair amount of physical evidence, including glass, clothing, buckshot, and gun wadding, had been recovered from the Coleman residence. Examinations made in Lynchburg indicated that the weapon used in the slaying was most likely a 12-gauge double-aught buck, using either a 2 3/4 or a 3-inch Magnum shell. The shell itself was thought to be something other than a regular load, as more than 9 pellets were recovered from the door, wall, and victim. The firearms examiner noted that the wadding found at the scene was consistent with a Winchester Western, but also resembled that used by other manufacturers. Although he could only give an educated guess, the examiner felt that the shell was most likely a Winchester load manufactured by Sears, and that the weapon itself was a single-shot or bolt-action double or single-barreled shotgun. According to this document, dated August 7, 1978, evidence technician D.T. Robertson submitted 10 items for examination by the Forensic Science Lab in Richmond and made several specific requests. These included: 1. Check the trousers found in Doc's bedroom for hair and fibers. 2. Check the belt in the green trousers for fingerprints. 3. Examine the buckshot and wadding and attempt to identify the weapon used in the killing. 10 days later, the Richmond lab reported its findings. No fingerprints or latent palm prints were found on the belt. A number of head and body hairs were found on the 3 sets of trousers from Doc's bed, but no hairs or other trace evidence was found on the pair through which the belt was still looped. The wadding and buckshot found at the scene were consistent with 12-gauge cardboard shotgun wads and shot. However, no determination as to make and model could be made. Along with their field and forensic investigations, authorities also took time to formulate a working profile of the as-yet unknown killer. Authorities felt that robbery was most likely the motive, and that the perpetrator was either someone who knew Doc Coleman personally or had learned a good deal about him, possibly from patrons or other employees of the Oakville store. The killer was almost certainly a male, and it was felt that he was probably proficient in the use of a shotgun and knew enough about ballistics to know that buckshot is much more difficult to trace back to a specific weapon or person. Building on this last point, it was also felt that the killer was somewhat intelligent or perhaps experienced. He was a planner, not an individual who acted on impulse. He was likely someone who would blend in with the surroundings and not appear out of place. As it appeared that Doc had been killed at the very outset, authorities felt that the killer either would have been recognized by Doc or that the killer had more to hide than just the homicide and robbery. The fact that only the money from Doc's trousers was taken and the rest of the premises left undisturbed again indicated an individual either of intelligence or with prior experience. In 1978, investigators opined that the killer was most likely a drug addict, a former convict, or someone with a mental handicap. However, while the killer may have known something of Doc's habits and financial status, they apparently did not possess an intimate insight into his daily life or a complete knowledge of his residence. Otherwise, their take would have been much higher. While the killer made off with one of Doc's wallets, they apparently either did not know about or did not remember Doc's other 2 wallets, one of which was later found in his green trousers and the other in a drawer. The wallet in the drawer alone was found to have contained $490. The investigation continued, but as weeks gradually turned into months and leads hit dead ends, the case began to turn cold. Hoping to reinvigorate the nearly moribund investigation, the Appomattox County Sheriff's Department, in conjunction with Doc's family, posted a $1,000 reward for information leading to an arrest, the first time such a step had ever been necessary in Appomattox County. When asked how long the reward would remain in effect, Sheriff Gene Richardson did not mince words. He stated, quote, "Until we find out whoever it is, the investigation will be continued until we solve it," end quote. Despite the reward and the promise that any informant's identities would be kept confidential, no useful leads were forthcoming, and the investigation again began to freeze over. It would not thaw again for another 5 years. In November of 1984, 34-year-old Robert Edward Lambert was arrested in Des Moines, Iowa, and charged with the 1980 robbery and murder of Campbell County, Virginia resident Daniel Woolridge. Lambert had been on the run from Campbell County authorities since December of 1980. Even then, members of an investigative team theorized that the two incidents may have been connected. Newspapers in 1984 noted the striking similarities between the Woolridge murder and that of Doc Coleman. Both men were killed after answering their door. Both were shot, and both were known to carry large sums of cash on their person. At the time, Appomattox County Sheriff Gene Richardson declined to comment publicly. Lambert was convicted of the murder-robbery and would spend the next 29 years of his life behind bars. During that time, he continued to deny any involvement in Doc Coleman's murder. When Lambert came up for parole in 2013, one of the stipulations was that he must first submit to a polygraph examination concerning the Coleman murder. Lambert took the test and passed. Investigators again found themselves back at square one, where they remain to this day. Funeral services for Alfred Harwood Coleman were held on Sunday, August 6, 1978, at the Trinity United Methodist Church. He was laid to rest alongside of his parents in the Rebecca Cemetery in Concord, Virginia. Today, his gravesite sits quietly in a peaceful, shaded corner of this country cemetery. Surviving members of Doc's family continue to tend to his final resting place. Most of the original investigators into Doc Coleman's murder have long since passed away. Among them, former Sheriff James Eugene Richardson, who died at his home in Pamplin, Virginia in November of 2016. Richardson had served as Appomattox County Sheriff from 1971 until his retirement in 1995, the sixth longest-serving sheriff in Virginia history. Today, his son Robbie is a chief deputy at the same department. Although time is quickly becoming a powerful enemy, the investigation into the murder of Alfred Harwood Coleman continues. Recent developments have prompted Appomattox County officials, including current Sheriff Donald Simpson, to take a fresh look at the 42-year-old case. Simpson may indeed have one final card to play, albeit something of a long shot. Recent advances in the field of trace DNA have raised the question of whether or not the trousers found on Doc Coleman's bed may yet have more to tell. However, the process is quite new and very expensive, and with no guarantee of results, positive or negative. Science aside, Sheriff Simpson feels that Doc Coleman's murder is still a case which can be solved. His current plan is to hopefully shake the investigation up by generating as much public awareness as possible. He feels that someone out there, perhaps someone in our viewing audience, knows what happened that warm summer night in 1978. He strongly urges anyone with information concerning the murder of Alfred Doc Coleman to break their silence and come forward, and hopefully, finally, wipe this 42-year-old tragedy off the blotter.
Authorities think it is likely that Doc Coleman knew his killer and that the primary motive was robbery. Over the years, the Appomattox County Sheriff's Department has developed a number of suspects, but in no instance has the evidence been strong enough to justify publicly naming them as even persons of interest. Given the small size of the community and the fact that killers have a tendency to brag about their exploits, authorities feel it is entirely possible that someone knows exactly what transpired on the night of August 3rd, 1978. And they would be very interested in hearing from anyone who saw or heard anything either that night or during the ensuing days and weeks. Today, authorities hope that continued and increased exposure for Doc Coleman's case will help to shake things loose. But 42 years have now passed since the night Doc Coleman was brutally murdered, so time is very much of the essence. The Appomattox County Sheriff's Department and Sheriff Donald Simpson have asked that you pay extra close attention to the following summation.
Alfred Harwood Coleman is thought to have been killed at approximately 9:30 p.m. on the evening of August 3, 1978. Doc was killed by a single shotgun blast to the face while standing in the rear doorway of his home about 3/4 of a mile north of Route 608 in Appomattox County, Virginia. His killer entered the home and is believed to have stolen a wallet from a pair of Doc's trousers in his bedroom. Nothing else in the home was disturbed, and the stolen wallet is thought to have contained a large sum of cash. Doc's lifeless body was discovered at approximately 7 a.m. on Friday, August 4, 1978. Doc worked as a clerk at the nearby Oakville Farmers Supply Store and normally would have the store open by 6 a.m. When he had not shown up by 7 a.m., his absence was noted, and 2 acquaintances went to his home to investigate. Forensics determined that Doc had been shot with a single-shot or bolt-action 12-gauge shotgun. It is not known if the gun was a double or single-barreled model. Buckshot pellets recovered from the scene indicated that the brand of shells used may have been manufactured by Sears. Neither the wallet nor the murder weapon have ever been located. Authorities feel confident that the killer had at least a working knowledge of Doc's daily routine and may even have been known to him. Doc was known by many to carry large sums of cash on his person, and it is felt that the killer had somehow acquired this knowledge either through personal or second-hand contact. Authorities also feel that the murder and robbery had been well planned in advance by someone familiar enough with the area around Doc's home to blend in without drawing attention to themselves. While possibly not a resident of Oakville, there is a strong possibility that the killer may have been local. If you have any information concerning the 1978 murder of Alfred Harwood Coleman, please contact the Appomattox County, Virginia Sheriff's Department at 434-352-2666.